Present.
Dan Haggerty,
Present.
Barbara Mathewson,
Present.
Dave Olson,
Present.
Michelle Weil,
Present.
and I'm here. It's all council members are present.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Welcome everybody to the September 23rd council meeting. We're on a virtual Zoom meeting. During the meeting, there will be an opportunity for you as a member of the public to speak. To do this, raise your hand using the raise hand, which can be found at the bottom of the participants list. Okay. So we're going to start our meeting with the supervisor's report. Carrie Dahlman.
Actually, I'm going to be trying to take this one for the first time.
Go for it, Tina.
So,
Welcome.
good evening, Midcoast Community Council members and members of the community. My name is Lena Silverman, and I'm providing a report on behalf of Supervisor Don Horsley's office at the County of San Mateo. The 2020 census is finishing up next week, and currently San Mateo County has almost 80% participation, which is the highest percentage of any county in California. Within San Mateo County, the lowest participation rate is in Pescadero with 50%, which is still a vast improvement from the 2010 census, which saw about 20% participation. Getting as much participation as possible is extremely important in ensuring that our community is given the resources that it deserves. San Mateo County is continuing the COVID-19 response. Based on the state's criteria, every county in California is assigned to a tier based on its test positivity and adjusted case rate. There are 4 tiers from widespread to minimal. Our county showed a lower rate these past 2 weeks and has now been moved to a less restrictive red tier. San Mateo County will be opening a second testing site next week, which will add the capacity for an additional 5,000 tests every week. This will be static in a static location while the other one will continue to travel based on need. As a fire update, the Sisu fire is now at 100% containment with over 85,000 acres covered. San Mateo County is working with the Resource Conservation District on ways to protect our county from future fires of this magnitude. Primarily, the conversation is focused on reducing fuel load and the dangers of our county's topography, population density, and limited egress. The Board of Supervisors has a study session in the works titled Healthy Forests and Protecting Our Community and Ecosystem from Future Fire Damage. This study session will be on the 14th of October and will begin at 9 a.m. It will be open to the public. I will send out details on how to participate once they are available. San Mateo County's annual allocation of funds to the Midcoast Community Council has been signed by both the chairman of the board as well as the county manager. It has been sent to the budget office and is awaiting approval. An update on Caltrans State Route 1 Traffic Operational Systems Improvements Project. After feedback from the coastal community, Caltrans has decided to extend the comment period until October 11th. These are all my updates this evening, and I would like to open up to any questions. I also have some resource links that I will paste into the chat box. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Lena? I want to make one comment to Lena regarding the Caltrans presentation on their signs. They do plan to make a presentation to the whole coast side. They were going to try to get an update for this meeting, but expect that meeting to be either in the afternoon of October 6th or October 8th. MCC will be able to render comments at our October 14th meeting and turn them in the next day, and those will be considered on time. So just a quick update. Other than that, it's not on our meeting agenda. Dan, do you have a question?
Yes. I'm sorry. So many things have been going on. I forgot the name of the
Lena
Silberman.
Thank you. So Lena, yes, I do have a question regarding the meeting time that you just mentioned. You know, a lot of us in the community work, and that time that you just announced doesn't work for most, well, most likely all of the working members of the community, myself included. So I would like to ask respectfully, politely, can we change the time to a, you know, that more people can be involved and participate?
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a really tough time. I know that we were really trying to get this done quickly to make sure that the Board of Supervisors was handling this in a timely manner. And we threw around a few dates and times, and it's just been kind of hard to find a time that all the board can be available for. I can make sure that it's recorded and that it can be accessed, because it is going to be a study session. There'll be room for comment, I believe, but it's more going to be kind of a time for everyone to become informed about the different options we have. So I'm not sure if we can switch the time, but I'll definitely make sure that the information will be available to everyone.
Okay, I'll leave it up to other community members of their comment and their opinion. Thank you.
Greg Diegas.
Lena, a few weeks back, I wrote the county controller, the manager, Dan Callagy, and I can't remember who else. And I asked what analysis the county does for the flow of funds, that is, sources and uses of funds for our region. In other words, do they track the tax payments received, estimated sales tax, and do they track the expenditure? And the answer I got was no, they do not retain a regional flow of funds analysis. So that was surprising in a first world county like we think we are. But I am most interested in seeing what you just said they produced, which is an allocation of funds to this region. Can you post a link to that in the chat box so that we could review the kinds of funding and for what we're receiving it?
I can see if that's okay. I mean, I can tell you from my understanding, which is a limited one, that what I was trying to explain was that Midcoast Community Council in particular is getting an allocation from the county that it's a one-time annual allocation, and that the Midcoast Community Council can then use. And
No, I'm not so interested in the few $1,000s they give the MCC. I'm talking about the broader issue of how much money do they receive from this section of the county and how much money do they invest in this section of the county across a wide variety of programs. Could be parks, could be roads, could be education, etc. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Greg, it's an item not on the agenda, so you're interested in what information you can get about that type of data.
That's correct, since I thought that's what Lena was bringing up.
No, I think this was something different she was bringing up. It was direct allocation to the MCC, but your question stands. Okay. Any other questions for Lena? Okay. We have two
Len,
public, yes,
interrupt for a moment.
go ahead, Dave.
I just want to remind everybody, when you're not talking, please stay on mute. If you don't mute yourself, I may mute you from time to time. Thanks.
Thank you. Harvey Roback.
Hi, Len.
Hi, Harvey.
I'm reporting from the Half Moon Bay City Council. We share a sheriff's department with the Midcoast, and today we had a meeting of our public safety subcommittee for the purpose of referring a criminal investigation to the Attorney General about the shooting of Sandra Harmon that occurred in May. I think that's of interest to the whole community to find out what the Attorney General has to say about not only the shooting, but the DA's investigation afterwards. So that, I believe, is of interest to Midcoast as well as the city. There are two upcoming meetings which I think are of interest to the Midcoast. The next city council meeting, which had been scheduled for Tuesday, September 29th, has been moved to the next day, September 30th at 6 p.m. because the presidential debate is on the 29th. And probably the only topic of that meeting is the land use plan update. And we're encouraging people to Zoom in, to send letters. It's going to affect not just the city, but the entire coastside for many years to come. So we're really interested in what people have to say about our land use plan. The schedule right now is that on October 6th, it will be put up in front of the council for final approval. And if it is approved, it goes to the Coastal Commission for their certification next. So that's an exciting time that can really affect what the whole coastside is going to look like. Also on October 6th, tentatively, Caltrans has agreed to make a presentation about their so-called Highway 1 improvement plan in front of the city council, and we will have a chance to get public comment as well as council comment about what we think of the plan. So those are two important meetings coming up very soon, and we hope that members of the public are interested in both of them. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Harvey. Anybody has any questions for Harvey, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, seeing none. We have Barbara Dye from the Granada Community Senate Services District is here. Did you want to speak, Barbara?
I hadn't planned to, but I'm happy to say that tomorrow night we're having a special meeting to review the park plan for what we've been calling the Burnham Strip. And we are actually not seeking a lot of public comment at that meeting. We've had 90+ comments submitted, and we've spent 2 years getting public input. We will be discussing changes to the proposed plan based on the recent public input tomorrow night. And of course, we will listen to anyone who wants to come and speak on the topic. And we're excited about moving this project forward. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, that closes this item. Next, we have on the agenda public comment for items that are not on our agenda for today. If there anyone who'd like to speak on this, that is an item not on our agenda today. Okay, I do not see any hands raised for that. I do see one. Edmundo Lorenas.
Can you hear me
Len,
okay?
could you?
Edmundo, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. I would request that the Midcoast Community Council meeting take up the subject of the Harbor District's change for their regular meeting from evening to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. My full disclosure to anyone who doesn't know is that I am a commissioner, and I objected strongly because it is going to make it difficult for working people who and also for our fishermen to attend a regular meeting where something of interest is on the agenda. The district has had shall we say, a disproportionate use of time when items related to one of our most important constituents, the local fishermen. In the past, they used to have the meetings in South San Francisco where it was really difficult for them to go. And now they're having the meeting at 1 p.m. So I would suggest that the board or the Midcoast Community Council send a strong letter to the Board of Supervisors objecting to this.
Okay. Thank you, Edmundo. That's an item that we can bring up when we consider future agendas, so we'll do it at that time. Dave Olson.
2 things. I have an announcement to make. The videos from all 3 of the candidate forums have links on the MCC webpage. So anybody who missed the candidate forums and wants to see how they went can watch those. And then Len, we got a chat message from Leanne that they would like to speak.
Okay,
Okay, Len?
just a second here. Well, Dave, was that someone who wants to speak now and is on phone?
They're not on their phone, but they can't raise their hand for some reason.
Oh, okay. But they're online. So if you're online and you can speak, I don't.
Len?
Just
can you?
yes,
Yeah, just I think it's a good idea. Just there's a lot of new people on tonight. Can you just go over direction on how to raise your hand? You know, to go to the participants and look for the icon.
Sure.
Oh, her hand is up.
When you want to speak, you raise your hand. The primary place, if you're logged online, is on the participants listing. And at the bottom, there is a place for raising your hand. Okay.
Thank you.
If in addition, if you're on the phone, it's *6. Okay. We have Liang is raising your hand. Go ahead, Liang.
Thanks, Len. Hi, members of the council. Thanks so much for your time. I'm sorry to have wasted yours with that exercise. I just wanted to echo what Edmundo had said and hope that the MCC will send the Board of Supervisors a letter requesting that special districts have meetings or regular meeting times during the evening when we that work during the day and families that are dealing with kids in school and fishermen as well can participate. Thanks so much for your time and all your great work. Have a great evening.
Sure. Barbara Mathewson?
No, I was just giving a thumbs up that I agree. That's not a
very good.
raised hand.
Got it. My oversight. Great. Okay. Does anyone have any announcements? Anyone else announcements? Okay. So we're going to move to our next item. That's the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda, the minutes for the September 9th meeting. I'll entertain a meeting to approve those minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Moved and seconded.
No. Never mind.
What did you say, Claire?
I don't think we've got the right thing on the agenda. We were going to table that.
That's right. I apologize. Claire let me know that.
You wanted to table the agenda, Claire?
Yes, because it's the wrong date on the agenda.
Okay. So it says September 9th. So I'm sorry, the agenda has the minutes for September 9th. Is that incorrect?
No, that's correct. There was an earlier version that was, the agenda on the website says August 26th.
Okay. Well, anyway, so you'd like to table it?
I think we need to.
Okay. We'll table that item for the next meeting. Okay, we're going to move forward then to that's it for Claire, to the regular agenda. The first item up is a presentation by Kate LaGrosse on building defensible space and vegetation management. Dan, could you introduce the speaker?
Barbara's going to say something first. I think, Barbara, did you want to just start and then hand it over to me?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everybody. The fires on the South Coast have to be a wake-up call for all of us. We have no real disaster preparedness or evacuation plan. On any given day, we have 3 manned fire engines and 1 ambulance from Half Moon Bay to Montera. When disaster hits, we will most likely all be on our own. In March of 2019, Supervisor Horsley allocated $75,000 of Measure K funds to launch the development of a countywide standardized emergency evacuation plan. This project recognized 300 evacuation zones in the county. As far as I know, we've never been updated on what our evacuation plan is or zones. We need to hold the county's feet to the fire and insist on working and communicating with the MCC. There's a large laundry list of issues that 1 or 2 meetings cannot resolve. This topic needs to be a priority before the county does connect the coast side or any large developments. Tonight is the first of what I hope will be a series of many topics covering the community's concerns regarding disaster planning and evacuations. The MCC has received many emails on the eucalyptus trees from north of the tunnel through Half Moon Bay. We need the community to continue to voice its concerns, get involved, join CERT, and be ready to help your neighbors and yourselves. Dan?
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to start with a short fitting story. My great-grandfather died trying to put out his farmhouse fire. My mom grew up in Chicago, and she was very aware of the Great Fire in Chicago. So they knew a lot about fire danger, and we never had candles in my home growing up. 1965, I was 3 years old. I somehow got interested in matches. My father found out, and he brought me into the kitchen and lovingly had a firm grip on my hand. He ignited the burner of the range, and he slowly brought my hand to the flame. At a certain point, I felt the pain, and he said to me, "Dan, fire can hurt you." And it hurt a lot. I think that this lesson for me at an early age is taken for granted by a lot of people. You really, truly do not know the pain and the danger of fire until you experience it personally. So, with the last, what was it, a month ago, dry lightning forecasts, and all of the fires that we've had in the area, it became to the top of my concern about our fire danger here in the coast side. It was 2011 when I first discovered that we are in and still are in a extreme elevated fire danger level, according to the CPUC map, the CAL FIRE map. So I believe strongly now is the time for our community to come together, to start talking about this with their neighbors, friends, family. I reached out to a tree professional. It was short notice, and I have to say that the MCC cannot endorse any single tree professional, but we have a speaker tonight that is more than happy to give her professional advice and experience, very experienced with eucalyptus trees. So I'd like to introduce Kate LeGros. She is a urban forest manager for the San Francisco Peninsula and Marin County area. And she is working for A Plus Tree Incorporated. And she is going to give us a little background on her experience and what is the best thing for building a defense of fire. Kate, are you here there?
Hi, everyone. Dan, thank you so much for that introduction. As Dan mentioned, I was invited to speak tonight. I am an urban forest manager, meaning I work in project management focused on trees and vegetation management. I have my bachelor in science in forest resources and conservation, and I focused on fire ecology. So I do have a presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll be taking questions at the very end, so make sure to write them down.
Okay,
All right, can everyone see that?
let's see. I don't think you're sharing your screen yet.
I can see it.
You see
Yeah,
it?
I see it.
Good enough.
I do see
I
it,
see
yes.
it.
Perfect.
I got it. Go
So my
ahead.
contact information's at the bottom, and I will have that again a little bit later on. But the main focus today is building defensible space and vegetation vegetation management for fire risk mitigation. So today I want to kind of quickly go over the history of fire in California, the problems we see with eucalyptus, the hazards they pose to private property, building defensible space, what needs to be done to build a defensible space, and then some examples of vegetation management projects. Just one moment. So traditionally, fire is a part of the ecology here in California. The Muwekma Ohlone people in San Mateo County used fire to regenerate grasses and attract game for hunting historically. We see lightning in the Sierra Nevada at higher elevations, and through tree core sampling, we can see that these forests have historically had fire about every 8 to 10 years. We do have fire-dependent ecosystems here in California, like the pine forests, and then we have fire-adapted ecosystems like chaparral, which we see on the coast and in Southern California. In 1910, there was a great fire in Idaho and like the Montana area, and it actually came after a period of significant drought. It was about a year of drought, and then there was some small fires, a big wind event happened, and over 3 million acres burned in just 2 days. That resulted in about 100 firefighters passing away. And really, because that was such an important, significant cultural event, a lot of those firefighters that survived went on to join the Forest Service. And unfortunately, that mentality of, huge disdain to fire and suppressing fire as soon as possible spread throughout the Western United States. So California, people sometimes talk about California and what it smells like. And a lot of times I'll hear it smells like eucalyptus forest. So it's very much integrated into the landscape here already, but it was brought over in the mid-1800s. After the gold rush era and the boom in development, we saw such deforestation in the redwoods and native trees that the Forest Service thought there would be a significant lumber disadvantage. So the California Tree Culture Act of 1868 was passed, and it encouraged people with various tax incentives to plant a lot of trees, including near roadways. And the eucalyptus was thought to be very popular because it was really fast growing. They thought it was going to be a great timber crop, but the wood is actually pretty weak and isn't very good to work with. So despite a lot of farmers reporting back, this isn't a good crop, the state continued to plant throughout the state of California. And ultimately, a huge majority of the eucalyptus groves we see today are old abandoned plantations. So something that eucalyptus doesn't like is freezing cold weather. And in 1972, the Bay Area went through a hard freeze. Most of these eucalyptus did die back, and then they were cut at the stumps. Well, the eucalyptus, like most trees and living organisms, really wanted to live. So it took the energy in the stumps and the roots, and they shot back up what are called epicormic shoots or sprouts. And sometimes, tree people will call these suckers or voluntary sprouts. But as you can see on the picture here on the right, this is just a small stump I saw last week that was shooting up these tiny suckers. So something that happens is the stumps will resprout, and then those grow into mature tree sizes, and they're way more dangerous. They don't have a solid structure or trunk, and they're really messy. So that happened in the East Bay, in the Oakland Hills, and the entire area was really inundated with the blue gum eucalyptus species. As we all know, in 1991 was the East Bay firestorm, a devastating event. And ultimately, from my understanding, a lot of it had to do with the dry vegetation that year, just too much fuel in such a small area. And because the hills are a lot of cul-de-sacs, there was not a proper evacuation route in place. So ultimately, when we remove eucalyptus, or when that is done, we need to make sure that the stumps are being treated correctly. And the best way to do that is stump grinding and root grinding. Their roots can go pretty deep, and they really do have the tendency to sprout back. But if we can get some stump grinding done, or maybe have to come back and do another round of stump grinding, that usually will take care of them from resprouting. However, I have a lot of clients that have their eucalyptus on hillsides, and we don't want to do any sort of stump or root grinding out of fear of, any sort of erosion. We have to be mindful of soil compaction. So every tree is different, and every situation will be assessed differently. But if stump grinding is not a good option, I also recommend just taking black plastic bags, something pretty thick, and then we would basically wrap the stump. We'd cut it to grade, wrap it, and then just pin it down with the gardening pins, so that the stump doesn't have any access to sunlight, so it's not going to photosynthesize, and hopefully that will prevent any resprouting. I will comment on the use of herbicide for treating the stumps. Sometimes it is used, but definitely I want that to be the last option available. And if it is applied, it's just to the stump. It is a targeted application. I don't support, broad, spraying herbicide on any land. Really, with eucalyptus throughout the Bay Area, when I'm working with private landowners, most of my clients are either private homeowners, private landowners, or homeowners associations. We need to always identify, what are we trying to accomplish? So this is my client here in San Francisco, and this is private property, but it's just near Stern Grove eucalyptus. And our main concern is the ivy acting as ladder fuels from the ground up to the canopy. And my client was really concerned that, a fire could start, it would travel up that ivy, get into the canopy, and then the whole grove could be consumed. So initially we had started to work on doing some ivy removal treatments. When a large limb, which you can see here in the middle picture circled, it fell into the neighboring property. It was a good situation, like no one happened to be in the backyard at that time, but it just goes to show, like, eucalyptus species is very unpredictable. If they're not cared for and really trained as a young tree to be strong and have an appropriate structure, they can fork off and have different kind of branching. And ultimately this one, I believe, fell just because it hadn't been structurally pruned, and this branch was actually kind of like twisted around. A big wind event, and sure enough, it fell. So eucalyptus is also habitat. As we know, there are some raptors that will nest in the eucalyptus. My team, we definitely respect bird nesting season, and we don't work in a tree even if there is a raptor nest. There are some areas that if you're required to get a removal permit or a pruning permit, that you would also need a biologist assessment of the area, especially if it is bird nesting season. But ultimately, my team, if we're up in the tree and we see an active nest, we're going to leave the tree, and that's for the safety of the birds, but also for the safety of my team. Mother raptors can be very aggressive. Honeybee hives are also very common in all sorts of trees. And, that's something that could be moved. If the eucalyptus or any tree really does need to be removed for safety, we have several people that can come out and remove the queen, and then the rest of the hive will follow. And then I also know there's a lot of talk about the monarchs roosting in the eucalyptus, really throughout the peninsula, going down to Santa Cruz and beyond. And historically, their native tree of preference would be the Monterey cypress or the Monterey pine trees. But I think preserving as much forested area as possible while still making it safe for the community due to fire risk is absolutely possible. I wouldn't want to remove eucalyptus with active monarchs in them October to February. So really, as we know, fire behavior in California is dependent on topography, fuel loads, and weather. So my greatest concern for the communities on the peninsula are the buildup of fuel in the understory and the midstory, and having that really attached to the canopy and act as a ladder fuel from the ground level to the top of the trees. As you can see on the left side here, a fire suppressed forest has a lot of fuel vegetation built up. And when a fire does come through on the ground level, it can get up in the canopies and then spread and really just destroy the entire forested area. Fire wouldn't be prescribed fire wouldn't be the only way to manage the vegetation. I'm not even going to propose doing anything like that just at this point in time. But I know CAL FIRE and I believe the Parks Department are working on some independent projects on that. Once fire's on the ground, it generally is going to move uphill, upslope. But as we know with these larger fire events, embers can really travel in any direction. They could land in the canopy of a tree. And that's why it's extremely critical to build defensible space and create distance between the trees and your home or your property. So defensible space is really broken down into 3 zones. Typically now it's more popular to talk about the first 2 zones. And the first zone would be from your home out about 30 feet, or depending on the vegetation or topography. And we need to eliminate all these smaller fuels, making sure that the grass is cut, the gutters are cleaned, nothing is touching the roof in terms of tree branches. Everything needs to be cleared back and really spaced from itself. For zone 2, that's going to be kind of from that 30-foot mark out until your boundary line. And excuse me, that's really where my team comes in. We work to do horizontal and vertical spacing, removing dead debris, dead trees, anything like that. And then thinning out trees. You know, trees shouldn't be touching. The canopies shouldn't be touching because of fear of fire getting up in there and then just spreading throughout. With these eucalyptus groves, I mean, I understand what those are like. And so that's really difficult to achieve. But at least getting started within that first 100 feet from your property line is hopefully going to provide some better safety. Excuse me. So homeowners and private landowners can really take vegetation management into their own hands when it comes to mowing their grasses, you know, doing raking, the things that you would typically be able to accomplish on your own. And anything like smaller that you feel comfortable doing with a weed whacker or a brush cutter, I absolutely encourage you to do that. But I would recommend consulting with a professional, whether it's a forester or an arborist or a vegetation manager, to remove any hazardous tree or dead tree or tree too close to your home. And I really can't stress that enough. Even if it's small and it looks like something you could do, like the way that trees work with gravity and the way they interact with the landscape and the combination of chainsaws, like I really just would recommend always hiring a professional. Making sure that anything over the home, over the chimney, typically it's 10 feet from the home or the chimney, but right now I'm seeing a lot of people request even further removal, at least 14 feet, branches 14 feet from the home. Creating horizontal spaces and vertical spaces so that you have a bush here and then you don't immediately have the canopy of a tree hanging right over it. These are all things I would recommend hiring a professional to do. As I mentioned, this is pretty much standard clearance pruning you would see in maybe some apartments or homeowners situations, but we need to be mindful if your community does back right up against these wild areas that we're probably going to need to take it back even more. From my understanding, at least tree care professionals have the ability to cut trees back to the boundary line. So even if it is on a neighboring property or a county line, we can take it to your fence line or your boundary line in order to make the community or your home safer. And so then I just wanted to kind of give you guys an outlook on really what zone 1 vegetation management, a lot of it can be done by an individual. And then once you get into zone 2 and zone 3, those would be like definitely needs to be left up to some professionals here because it's going to require some specialized equipment, understanding what you're removing and what you're keeping, or if you are removing a good amount of trees, what's the plan for replacing, and then doing some sort of restoration ecology with the area. I definitely love trees, but my goal is never to remove a huge swath of trees and then see the land sit vacant. If it's sitting there, it's opportunity for more invasive plants to come in, more eucalyptus, blackberry, poison oak, acacia sprouts. Really, it's not a one-time project. It's accepting that something needs to be done and then understanding that it's going to need to continuously be managed. So this is a project that we recently completed for fire risk mitigation, just using some hand tools. And really my client's property would be the fence line here. And as you can see in the picture on the left, and then the picture on the right, we created 3-foot spacing from the fence line. It's a little bit difficult just because all the shrubs are overlapping a bit, but they are spaced out and better prepared if a wildfire were to come through in that area. This is just the first segment. They are continuing to reduce the fuel loads and monitor vegetation on I would guess I say a quarterly basis. So this was just the very first completion of the project. So this is another angle. We removed a significant vegetation here, anything that was hanging over the fence. We started to thin out the shrubs and space them a bit. I believe that might be some ceanothus or some juniper along the ground there. And I know just from my experience working in Marin County that juniper and bamboo are really being encouraged for removal by the fire marshal, just because they can become so dry and they really can ignite really very quickly. All vegetation burns, that's not a doubt, but sometimes some species like eucalyptus, like juniper, are a little bit more fire prone. So this would be a very intense project. This is a mastication project I just recently completed, where my client's private property sits just at the top of this hillside, and there had been no management in this area. The entire understory was eucalyptus sprouts, blackberry, acacia, maybe just some toyon shrubs, but there was no native trees on site except for a few pines. So we came in with our masticator machine and we were able to significantly reduce all of the understory so that there's none of these smaller fuels that fire would be able to travel through. In conjunction with the mastication, we also raised all of the trees 12 feet. And you can even see here on the right-hand side, just past this larger eucalyptus, there was one eucalyptus that was covered in English ivy, and we raised that all the way up 12 feet so that if a fire were to travel through this area, it would be remaining on the ground and not going up into the canopy. And lastly, as I mentioned, it's really important to consider what's going to happen once you remove the eucalyptus, whether you're planting native shrubs, are you doing nothing, are you planting native oaks? And as you can see in this picture, in the circles, those were just smaller, 2-gallon, 5-gallon oak trees that were planted on my client's property. And this project, they're going to go through and continue to remove and thin out the eucalyptus really in phases year over year. They understand it's a pretty large project to take on, So I recommend doing work in phases. So I think it's like we've established, the first thing that needs to happen is going to be assuming the fire is already here and get those evacuation routes established and have your bag ready to go. Like vegetation projects can sometimes take several months to get planned, approve the work and then actually have the work executed. But just based on everything that has happened in the last several years with fire behavior in the fire season, I would prepare now first. Next, obviously get the defensible space for your home and your private property. And then I would say working on a community level with the fire adapted communities, work with the San Mateo County Natural Resource Defense Council, the Parks Department. They understand like you are also stakeholders in this situation. So community input and attending all of the meetings and continuing to work with CAL FIRE or whichever entities in charge of the projects. I mean, I can't encourage you enough, which it seems like your community is already doing that. So I'd like to kind of open up some questions, see if there's any specific questions about eucalyptus or building defensible space that I can answer right now. You can also email me at Kate, K-A-T-E, @aplustree.com. I'll have my contact information on the next page.
So Dan, I want to confirm with you. First, we'll have just information questions for our speaker in terms of what she spoke about, and then a more open discussion.
Sorry, just unmuted. Yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay. So if you want to ask questions of our speaker, first I'll ask the council. If anyone on the council wants to ask questions, raise your hands at this time. Okay. Barbara Mathewson.
Thank you. Kate, could you talk just a little bit about what you would do to prevent erosion on that big area that you were showing us that you thinned out?
Definitely. So this area, coming back in and establishing new trees is really going to help with any erosion issues. But because we left a significant amount of these larger eucalyptus, we didn't do any sort of stump grinding here. And the smaller eucalyptus that we did remove, those were bagged and pinned, so to prevent resprouting. But since this area didn't experience any sort of stump grinding or root grinding, the majority of the large eucalyptus roots are still firm in the ground. Coming in and planting native shrubs or any sort of trees that can help stabilize would be extremely beneficial. But this community, it's actually facing a PG&E road, and then the next side is more forested private property. So there's not a huge concern of significant erosion, whereas if it were sitting right above a home or a road that was used, that would be of greater concern.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Haggerty.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate, for tonight's presentation. Just a quick question on replanting. And in some areas, the water needs for the new plantings to really thrive. I'm on YouTube a lot. I grow some vegetables in my backyard and I use compost myself a lot. And from what I've learned, compost can be very helpful in seeing that whatever is planted, has a little bit of moisture protection to hold the moisture in the ground and requires less irrigation to get started. Do you use this method, or what do you use, or what from your experience, works best to make certain that whatever is planted really kind of takes off, understanding the the oils in the eucalyptus that may kind of make that a little more difficult?
Definitely, that's a great question. So my team utilizes biochar, which is a all natural like biocarbon soil enhancement. But we need to always make sure that the species we're replanting with would be tolerant of the soil, the location, making sure it gets enough sunlight and not too much wind exposure. So just based on the given topography and soil horizons in these areas, we want to really kind of reestablish the native species or look to do something that would thrive there anyway. I understand, the oils in the eucalyptus leaves and roots can be kind of problematic for getting things established in a situation like this where we are leaving a good number of trees on site still. But ultimately, you can better prepare the soil and the land by, I would say, tilling it and applying some compost or biochar before the planting is done. Once a tree is put in, whether it's a 5-gallon tree, 15-gallon tree, or something bigger, making sure that it does have biochar and essential micronutrients to help the tree roots get established. And then really all trees are going to require whether it's an installed irrigation or hand watering for the first few years to help those new roots get established. In a situation where you're leaving eucalyptus on site, I would really be interested in having a conversation with whoever it may be to discuss reestablishing native species or California natives.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else on the council have questions at this time? Okay. From the public, we have Kay Williams.
Hi, this is Kimberly Williams, and thank you for this presentation, Kate. I have a question about the plastic coverings that you mentioned to cover the stumps. How are those retrieved eventually? Like, how do you prevent the plastic from degrading and going into the landscape? And is there an alternative covering that you could use instead of plastic?
Great question. So in all the projects I've managed so far, I've worked with the private landowner or, whoever the owner of the property is to make sure that I'm able to come in a year later to do a follow-up assessment, check on the site. If there is any further work we are needing to get done to make the community more fire safe, we are able to do that and at the same time check on those stumps. Typically, a year, I would say we would be lucky if the stump was dead by now, but we have experienced where I've gone to a client's property, they've previously bagged the stump and it is still trying to continue to grow. So it sometimes requires a bit of time, but just really monitoring the stump, seeing if it is shooting up anything. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, other vegetation professionals will sometimes try to bag the stump with gardening tarp, the black gardening tarp, but those do have fine holes in them and they will grow, the eucalyptus will grow right through that. So for the sake of sustainability, I never want to leave plastic out on site. But I would say in the hierarchy of treating the stumps, if stump grinding is not possible, then bagging the stumps. And then if bagging the stumps is not possible, then making sure you're doing a concentrated treatment of herbicide without the risk of drift or potentially harming any plants or insects. From my experience, once the herbicide is dry in about 25 minutes, it wouldn't be harmful once it's dry, but it's definitely, I use it conservatively.
Thank you. Michael P. Let's see, Michael P. Did you, you had your hand up, I believe. Okay.
You're muted, Michael P. You're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I don't do this often enough. I'm a kind of an amateur. Okay. I would like to, first of all, this is not a commercial presentation. This is around generalized risk management. Yeah. And the reason is I live in Moss Beach. I'm up along the Buena Vista area, and we have a lot of natural vegetation. And if we were to go in and start hacking and hewing to get a clear 30-foot margin around our houses, we would be well into the territory that's managed by the county.
Mhm.
If we had to go out 100 feet, we're definitely into county territory. We have had a number of situations where that becomes a conflict. The other one is, you were talking about evacuation routes.
Mhm.
We saw in the Pescadero and South fires where the roads were closed off, and the transportation through our area was Highway 1 North and 92 are going east. And we brought this up on numerous occasions about evacuation plans or emergencies, and it's always fallen on deaf ears. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I think since I work closely throughout Pacifica to Half Moon Bay, I understand your pain, and I understand we have one-way roads, and unfortunately, I believe during development that was maybe not considered. Like, hey, let's build a few more roads where the tunnel is not the only route out, or right along the cliffs of Highway 1. I mean, these are my clients too, and I can never give professional advice or comment on evacuation routes, but I think if the community or the council or the city is not organizing, then it's really going to be in your own hands. I think getting together as a community and making these plans is probably the best thing that you can do. But what we saw in Australia at the beginning of the year is a town that is extremely similar to Pacifica in population, vegetation, and geography. And they had to get onto boats and be boated out into the ocean to get away from the fire. And that would be my absolute nightmare, and I don't want that to happen. So while I'm not a transportation expert or, really know much about roadways at all, I would just say using your voice and working as a council to get something done is the best thing you can do.
Thank you. Dan, at this point, do you want to make a comment or to the council in terms of the discussion? I think you were interested in transitioning to a more open discussion.
Quick question. No, just a quick question for Kate or follow up. It may generate more. In regards to the question around the use of plastic for bagging, I just wanted to add that I have learned from someone that has personal experience basically killing the sprouts of a eucalyptus tree, and essentially some type of a black plastic cover. Now, this particular person said that it also required kind of opening up that plastic, getting in there. Don't remember the frequency. I want to say just roughly 3 months, 4 months, and then breaking off the albino, very soft new growth, just making it more difficult for this tree to come back. It's going to try really hard, and so that, I think there was a cycle of about 4 times of that, and then once at a certain point you realize it's done. It can't. It's not giving anything else. But in regards to the concern of plastic, sometimes that even if it's for a short time, a year, maybe it's not it's cheap, easy to get, works. But has anybody ever, do you have any experience, maybe using like a sheet of steel, of some type of sheet metal that could also do the same thing? And then now you don't have to worry about the wind blowing or maybe animals lifting it up and disturbing it. And because it is true that it could have to sit there for a year or maybe a little more, right?
No, I don't have anyone who's been that ambitious yet, but I think that would probably be the best case scenario if you're working with a really large stump that you can't do stump grinding at, and you have something really large. I just don't know if that would be able to prevent, light infiltration if it's just covering the top. I would say making sure that something that is black or like really difficult to see through is covering the stump completely. So I'm not sure how you would do that. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you. I want to sort of raise the following point of information. So I think, Kate, thanks very much. You've covered especially many things that are helpful to owners of private property to basically deal with it on their land. And I think our previous speaker also raised the point that ultimately here, private property then abuts the public lands, of which there are many. We have invited to our next council meeting, Kelly Snelson, the director of the RCD. And I think she's a person who can speak pretty well in terms of the public lands and some of the issues there. But looking back more generally, I guess, does anyone have further discussion or comments they wanted to raise with regard to wildfire concerns or evacuation? Okay, so
I do. Yes, I do.
well, Dan, you've talked several times on this. Let me get
Well-
Greg. Let me get Greg Diegas, who has not been speaking
Sure.
yet.
Sure.
Greg.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, I may be repeating some things here, but this eucalyptus danger is only one issue in a suite of over a dozen fire vulnerabilities we have here on the Midcoast. And I would recommend that a fire preparedness agenda item be on the MCC's agenda for every meeting for the foreseeable future. And I would go further and say that the MCC needs to do more than communicate the concerns of its residents to the county, but also has to oversee projects that are done by others to make sure that they're actually getting stuff done or not. This is nothing more than just having them publish a task list and tracking progress. With respect to eucalyptus fuel reduction, I see this as a three-part, three-agency problem. I spoke to Nicholas Calderon last week, and GGNRA has a role, and Dan's done a little research there on what they've got up there and posted. San Mateo Parks seems responsive. They're interested in doing stuff, but by the time you go through the budget process, it's a multi-year effort, which is one reason this needs to start now. And for Granada, there are definitely eucalyptuses on the medians. I think maybe Barbara Dye could speak to this, but I think El Granada is going to have to decide what it wants to do about the eucalyptus risk on Avenue Alhambra and the other places. So finally, I just want to mention, I'm going to be writing articles on both the suite of general fire preparedness issues and the three-part eucalyptus removal issue in the next couple of days on Coastside Buzz. And I hope that will help inform discussion, and I welcome comments from residents.
Thanks, Greg. Next is Claire Toutant.
I wanted to thank Barbara and Dan for getting Kate to come talk to us. It was excellent presentation and exactly what we needed to hear in terms of looking at things from a scientific and data lens to get us started. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Michelle Dragoni.
Hi. I was wondering if there was any possibility that there could be an industrial market with the eucalyptus. Eucalyptus and cotton and bamboo, they're all used for a variety of oils and fabrics and all kinds of things. The reason why fires were less of a problem in the early 1900s is because there was a lot of logging. And because there was a lot of logging, there was a lot of road management. And because of the road management, you had a lot of sort of built-in breaks. And I know Big Creek had some issues with the fire, and maybe they could pivot, Big Creek lumber that is, maybe they could pivot and harvest some of the eucalyptus and create more fire roads and more fire breaks. That's my idea.
Thanks, Michelle. A note to Lena, Don's Chief of Staff, Chris Hunter, has experience with some previous efforts at commercial applications in this area. So Lena, you might want to ask Chris if he wanted to give information at a future meeting.
Definitely, I can definitely do that. Thank you.
Dolores Silva next, please.
Hello, I would like to second Claire's views about what a great report this is, and thank you. Thanks to Barb and Dan, and I'm sorry, I already forgot our presenter's name, but thank you very much. It was very informative. We've been very concerned about this in regards to new developments that are being proposed, and the fact that we have this one road and no really good evacuation plan that I can think of, even if you could try to put one together. This one road is a constricting factor. But we did put together a report a couple of years back. JQ did it, and it was well received, but then nobody seems to take a hold of this as the overall big picture, not the county. I mean, Don Horsley will say, well, you need to work with Pacom Bay, or you need to work with somebody else. And that's not going to cut it anymore. I mean, everything I read now about these fires and climate change is that we can only expect it to get worse. Thank you, MCC, for having this tonight. I hope you will continue having more information on this. And I think this is a critical point on our coast side, as it is probably in all of California, but it really needs serious attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. Dave Olson.
I just wanted to say that unfortunately the eucalyptus we have is got almost no commercial applications. That was the great tragedy. There were two different eucalyptus called blue gum, and they brought in the wrong kind, and it's planted all over California. It's not the only eucalyptus we have, but it's the vast majority of them. And it's not good for lumber. It's not, you can't burn it in the stove because it's got a high creosote level. So far, nobody's really found a use for it. The other thing I wanted to say for those who didn't attend our last meeting is the county is already working with the Resource Conservation District to try to develop a tree management program for the eucalyptus in the El Granada area and other areas. So that is in progress, but it will take a while. And the county is putting money into that. I think the amount was in the $5 million range.
Thank you, Dave. And as I mentioned, the RCD director will be coming to our next meeting, and we'll talk about that under future agendas. Dolores again. Dan Haggerty.
Yeah, I think, why don't you just reserve me so that I have an opportunity to just close the agenda item?
You want to close it out when you be the last speaker, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Dan, Dolores, did you want to say one more thing?
Yes, I forgot to mention, one of the things that worries me the most is that there's a eucalyptus grove right after the tunnel, between the tunnel and Lindemar. And, you know, we talk about this one road, which has a north and a south direction. But if a tree goes down on that eucalyptus grove there, we only have south. And that is a big concern. And I hope that that particular grove gets attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dan, would you close out in this section, please? Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So thank you very much, Kate, for your wonderful presentation tonight. And I just wanted to kind of review some of the hot topic areas. You know, Dolores Silva just mentioned the between the North Portal and Lindemar. So I've done a little research on that and talked to some people in that area, and everybody's encouraging me. I contacted Senator Jerry Hill, had a personal conversation with him, and he said that essentially it's up to the county to really kind of take a lead on that. I think 2 weeks ago, Supervisor Horsley answered my question with saying, yes, Dan, you are right, and we need to look into that. So I'm hoping that he is going to take action in regards to that. And then, first off, the easiest thing to start with is the Caltrans right of way, cleaning that area. We also have the medians in El Granado. We have the school district property near Coral Reef that we need to contact the school district separately. We can ask the Supervisor Horsley to help us with that. GGNRA started some removal service. I walked the areas. Was not impressed on the amount of tree removal. They're going to do a lot of fuel removal, but it seems like they're going to leave a lot of trees there, taking only the smaller ones out, maybe, if I remember, 15 or so. Okay, and I think that in regards to the eucalyptus value, I did see some research that, yes, some eucalyptus making hardwood floors, but I think Dave is right. I think that it's not our strain. It's not our variety. I think maybe for some reason, the eucalyptus in Australia seems to be more valuable there. I'm not sure why, but I think realistically, with all of the fire activity we had recently and the new lightning storms, I think it's time. The time is now. I think everybody agrees that we as a community need to come together and really take action. We need to talk with our neighbors and friends and family and understand that we are in an extreme elevated fire danger. I think that over time, once we get started nibbling at this and doing things in phases, I think over time we're going to find new ways that we can try to save money and maybe put some use to this. I do know that in Pacifica, some eucalyptus logs were used as making waterfalls in one of the creeks so that the salmon can jump over. There's
thank you, Dan.
But yes, it will be expensive, and
okay,
being part of this, and I'll hand it over to you, Len. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to share. We're next going to our next agenda item, which is on Connect the Coast Side from the county. I'm going to share something on my screen first, just for information. Oh, everyone should be able to see our homepage. And what I want to draw attention to is on our items coming up, 4B and 4C, there were several documents available on our website. Some of these will be shown by the speakers and others are there for information. So that's available through the links on our website. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to introduce, and I think it will be Kate. So Kate Faulkner, I believe you're going to be the presenter for this next item. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah, hi Len, thanks. Hold on a second, I'll share my screen and I will be presenting tonight along with Shonda Singh, our senior transportation planner. But I will kick this off tonight. So before I start, can everyone see the screen? Looks like it's supposed to. Everyone can hear me? Okay, great. Well, in that case, good evening, members of the Midcoast Community Council and members of the public. My name is Katie Faulkner, and I'm a long-range planner at the County of San Mateo. I'm here tonight, along with Shonda, to present to you on the Connect the Coast Side 2020 Outreach Summary Report. And tonight, we're going to cover an overview of this year's Connect the Coast Side outreach efforts, a summary of the feedback we heard and the proposed updates to the plan, and we're going to review next steps. And I'll start with a very short background just for anyone who might be unfamiliar with this project. Connect the Coast Side is a comprehensive transportation management plan for the San Mateo County Midcoast, And the aim of this project is to improve mobility and safety for residents and visitors and workers on the Midcoast. Development of this project began back in 2014, and so far it has included creating development forecasts, projecting future traffic, identifying transportation deficiencies, and analyzing potential improvements. And on January 15th, 2020, we released a public working draft of the Connect the Coastside Plan for public review and feedback. And since then, we have worked on several different outreach efforts to hear feedback on the plan. And just last week, we released a report that summarizes those outreach activities, the feedback, and proposed updates to the plan. So I'll start really quickly just by going over some of the outreach efforts that we've been working on over the past few months. And I will say, you know, all of our outreach efforts have mostly been virtual. We did originally have in-person outreach events planned for March and April of this year, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the project team postponed those original events, and we reimagined our outreach efforts to ensure safety of participants. And the goals of our outreach were to hear from as many different coastside stakeholders as possible and to offer multiple ways to learn about and provide comments on the plan. And so, you know, our outreach efforts briefly included, we reviewed the results of the Listening to the Midcoast survey, which was a effort of the Midcoast Community Council and the county. And those had some really great bits of insight that helped us plan other outreach events. We made updates to the Connect the Coastside website to share information and also to create a comment box so that people could send us comments. We also got lots of comments over email during this time period. We held 3 virtual community meetings. We also worked on additional monolingual Spanish outreach, Spanish language outreach. We held a couple actually of virtual youth group meetings. And we also attended Midcoast Community Council meetings to hear feedback. So just going into a few of those outreach efforts in some more detail. The 3 virtual community meetings were held in May and June of this year. And those meetings included presentations on Connect the Coastside, polls to learn about participants and their transportation priorities, question and answer sessions, breakout rooms for small group discussions with feedback recorded by note takers, and then report outs to the larger group. And we had about 130 participants across those 3 public meetings. Some of those participants attended 2 or 3 meetings. And so we estimate that we heard from about 100 individuals altogether. And just a note, these virtual community meetings were conducted in English and weren't translated into Spanish, because we heard feedback that bilingual virtual meetings and with real-time translation maybe weren't the best experience for Spanish speakers. So with that in mind, we did some additional Spanish language outreach to hear from monolingual Spanish speakers who live and work on the Midcoast. And for that, we used a combination of strategies to both provide information on the plan and to ask for input. And this outreach was designed to make participation easy and accessible by reaching people in places they already visited and providing multiple options for participation. And this outreach included a dedicated Spanish language webpage, a 20-minute recorded presentation in Spanish that provided an overview of the plan that was posted on the website, short 2 to 3 minute videos in both Spanish and English posted to the ALAS Facebook pages and the Coastside Hope Facebook pages. And for reference, ALAS is a Coastside nonprofit group, and so is Coastside Hope. And those videos describe the plan and ask for input. We also had a paper survey, both in Spanish and English, that we distributed through the Coastside Hope front desk and food distribution, the ALAS food distribution, Pillar Ridge, and El Granada elementary school lunch service. And then lastly, we had phone surveys and online surveys conducted in Spanish. And through these efforts, we got a lot of views on our videos, and we heard back from about 30 Spanish speakers through the surveys. Another thing that we did is that we held actually a couple of virtual youth group meetings. We held one just last week, so that one isn't included in our report that we released last week, but the first one we did was back in July, and we worked with the Youth Leadership Institute on that one. And it was another virtual Zoom meeting. And we heard from 7 coastside youth about their transportation experiences and what their needs were, so that we could make sure that we incorporated the perspective of youth into what we heard and our proposed updates to the plan. And on the screen now is just the results of a couple of the poll questions that we asked them. And to summarize what we heard from this group, we heard that biking, walking, and transit improvements are the most important, because otherwise they have to rely on family members and friends to get them around, since they, for the most part, can't drive. And at our second youth group meeting last week, we heard, it was a very similar meeting. We heard a lot of the same things, and we heard from another 13 coastside youth about their experiences. And it was really great to hear from them. And I'll just say that, throughout this outreach, we heard a few different broad themes, things like traffic being a big issue, concerns over development, and concerns over existing conditions that make it difficult to walk, bike, and take transit. Of course, another big one we heard was concerns over evacuations and emergencies. And we want you to all know that we intend to have the proposals in Connect the Coastside address these issues and a lot more. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shonda to provide a summary of what we heard and the proposed updates for the plan.
Thanks, Katie. Next slide. So I will be focusing on reporting content from Appendix 7 of the meeting summary report, which is the summary of feedback and the proposed changes we plan to make to connect the coastside. In order to develop Appendix 7, we gathered feedback and grouped it into categories that are listed on the slide with additional subcategories. And so, as I said, I'll provide some key highlights, but please see Appendix 7 for full details. Next slide. Just a note on the slides, things that we heard, when I summarize those will be noted by an icon of an ear, and what we propose to change is noted by an icon of bidirectional arrows. Next slide. So I'll start with overarching concerns. Several commenters had overarching concerns about the plan, including how it incorporates the lenses of environment, sustainability, and Midcoast character. So we plan to incorporate these themes into the plan by adding references to existing policy documents like the county's green infrastructure plan, and further refining the goals and objectives to address these issues. Some of the concerns are also likely to be addressed as part of individual project design. So for example, the use of permeable pavements to improve sustainability, or designing to ensure ADA accessibility, would be part of individual project design and implementation. We also plan to add a chapter on community engagement to better characterize what we heard and the history of Connect the Coastside. Next slide. Several commenters requested clarification on the traffic and development analysis, and some expressed concern about the assumptions that the plan is based on, including the age of the data and about the lasting impacts of COVID-19 on transportation. A few commenters also found inconsistencies in the data tables within the plan and compared to the presentations, and wanted to clarify whether the plan's build-up projections are consistent with those of Half Moon Bay. Next slide. So we plan to add a more detailed description about the data, including the limitations of the travel demand model and software that's used to do the analysis in order to better characterize the improvements. We're also aware of some of the inconsistencies and are working with our consultants closely to confirm the analysis and ensure that the model outputs are consistent with the summary tables in the plan. We're also looking into whether we can add data to better characterize the transportation conditions, and we're continuing to work with Half Moon Bay to review our respective forecasts and traffic analysis. Next slide. We received a few comments on the recommended land use policies, and several commenters wanted to know more about the connection between Connect the Coastside and proposed new development projects. And a couple commenters suggested making the lot merger and lot retirement programs mandatory. Next slide. So we plan to shorten the voluntary period for the lot merger program to 1 year. The lot retirement program will remain the same. We'll add more discussion about the connection between the plan and current planning projects and better make the distinction that Connect the Coastside is not tied to any one specific development. The primary purpose of the plan is to address cumulative development impacts. And so as such, a proposed new development might be required to conduct transportation analysis and implement mitigations for their impacts. And those measures could help implement Connect the Coastside, but don't necessarily have to be aligned. Next slide. We received a lot of comments about the need for safe crossings of Highway 1, especially to connect key destinations together. Several commenters wanted to see more detail about the proposed crossings, like recommending median islands as proposed by the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Study. And a few commenters were concerned about the impact of pedestrian crossings on traffic flow. Next slide. We plan to keep the current locations for recommended crossings and are planning to add a few more for consideration based on the feedback we received. For example, several commenters wanted to add Highway 1 and Virginia Avenue to the plan since there's an existing marked crossing there, but little additional infrastructure. And rather than add project level detail for each crossing, we'll add discussion in the implementation chapter about the individual project design process and reference the guidance from the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Study. We're also examining the feasibility of adding a pedestrian overpass at Highway 1 and Northern Carlos Street to the plan. Next slide. We received a lot of comments about the desire for better bikeways, especially to support students to bike to school. And we heard a lot of support for the multimodal parallel trail to promote both walking and biking on the Midcoast. And a couple of commenters were concerned about the environmental impacts and feasibility of implementing bikeways, and specifically on Highway 92. Next slide. Based on the feedback, we intend to keep most of the bikeway recommendations as is, but are coordinating closely with the Plan Princeton and Active Transportation Plan planning teams to ensure consistency across the plans. For example, the recommendations for Airport Street and for bicycle parking in locations like Princeton Harbor. We plan to remove the recommendation for bike lanes on Highway 92 due to right-of-way constraints and instead recommend a Class 3 facility with wide shoulders. And changing this would make it consistent with the draft unincorporated San Mateo County Active Transportation Plan. Next slide. We received many comments about driving, including concerns about traffic congestion, especially on the weekends, and safety at intersections to turn from side streets onto the highway. Many commenters want to see controls like roundabouts or signals at intersections, but were quite divided about which approach would work best. We heard concerns about the cost and feasibility and timeline for implementation of roundabouts, and many commenters said they wanted signals if they could be implemented more quickly, especially at Cypress and Highway 1. Others were concerned about signals not fitting the Midcoast character and would prefer to wait for roundabouts. And other commenters felt that signals would work better than roundabouts because they would only stop traffic when cars were at the intersection instead of slowing speeds throughout the corridor. Next slide. So Connect the Coastside's analysis is a very preliminary look about what is feasible for intersection controls due to current conditions and projected future conditions. An intersection control evaluation will be required by Caltrans to conduct deeper analysis about which option, a signal, roundabout, or something else, would be the most appropriate for every location. And in addition, as I already described, we'll add more about the role of proposed new development. The county may require a developer to do a traffic impact analysis and mitigate their impacts. And those measures might be different than what's in Connect the Coastside, but don't preclude the county or its partners from implementing the plan. So we'll make those caveats clearer in Connect the Coastside, and we'll recommend roundabouts as a preferred solution for Highway 1, and revise the preferred solution for Highway 92 to a signal at the upper the upper western 9235 intersection and maintain the signal at the lower 9235 intersection. And lastly, we'll look for opportunities to add more context about traffic congestion, including regional impacts on local conditions. Next slide. Commenters were divided on the need and location for additional parking to serve visitors and park and ride users. Some thought that additional parking lots would lead to more driving to the coast, whereas others felt that designated parking would help address neighborhood impacts and reduce those, like circling for parking and litter. Many did not like the recommendation for the Etheldor Park and Ride lot, citing concerns about the distance of the lot from central Moss Beach. And a few commenters were concerned about the design of parking lots and the subsequent impacts on the environment, like on water quality and habitats. Next slide. The San Mateo County Local Coastal Program has several policies already about parking, including a table of sites recommended for parking. And the 2015 Coastside Access Study further assessed parking and recommended locations and programs. So we'll add references to both of these in Connect the Coastside and add more caveats about the need for analysis and coordination of proposed parking. For example, park and ride lots would only be explored for implementation in coordination with changes in Samtrans service to serve those lots. And we plan to remove the recommendation for the parking lot at Etheldor as a candidate park and ride site, and we'll continue to look at other locations. Next slide. Commenters were very supportive of transit and had ideas to make it better. These included the need for better amenities at bus stops like shelters and benches, express service to Caltrain and BART, better transit to serve students, school buses, and weekend shuttles to serve visitors. There were a few comments that questioned the new recommended bus stop location at Carlos near 16th and the recommendation to reroute the bus. Next slide. So we'll add these suggestions, including a discussion about the necessary transit improvements, potential associated costs, and need to engage Samtrans to increase commute, shuttle, and student services. We plan to remove the recommendation to reroute the bus and adding the bus stop, and instead emphasize the importance of connecting to the bus stop at 14th and Highway 1. Next slide. We received a lot of comments requesting more specificity about implementation, including recommendations to take a phased approach and the need for interim solutions to address pressing safety needs. Commenters were concerned about how long it might take to implement projects, and they did not want to wait for decades to see certain improvements. Some also suggested being more specific about what funding source could help implement each project. Next slide. Connect the Coastside includes projects to address both existing and current challenges and future impacts. So like I said already, some projects like a park and ride wouldn't be prioritized for implementation today because they depend on future growth and service changes. However, the county already seeks and continues to seek opportunities to implement projects to address existing needs like the highway pedestrian crossings and the multimodal parallel trail. So we'll add to Chapter 6 to include potential short-term interventions and add more specificity about the implementation channels, like the Caltrans State Highway Operation and Protection Program. We'll also add discussion about the community process needed for individual project design and implementation. Next slide. And so with that big picture summary, I'll briefly go on to next steps. Thanks so much for letting us share what we've heard from stakeholders like you over the past 9 months and our proposed changes to the plan. Next slide. So we will now be working to incorporate this feedback and revise the plan. We anticipate providing the MCC with a draft for review prior to a workshop with the Planning Commission. And after we gather feedback from key agencies, we'll prepare a final draft of the plan and the relevant environmental documents. So we anticipate at this time bringing Connect the Coastside to the Board of Supervisors for consideration in April of 2021. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe to talk a little bit more about next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Shonda, and thanks, Katie, for the presentation, and thank you, community council members and Chair Len Erickson for letting us present tonight. The one next step that I wanted to cover had to do with Coastal Commission review of Connect the Coast Side, and to talk a little bit more about community process. So the plan is a requirement of policy 2.53 in the Midcoast community, or I'm sorry, in the LCP, that says that basically if the county wants to eliminate the 40-year or 40 unit per year cap on residential dwelling units, then it needs to prepare this plan and to get it certified by the Coastal Commission. Well, we are of the mind that although we are not seeking the removal of the 40 unit per year cap, that therefore, we are not in a position where we need to get this plan certified, although we do intend to coordinate with the Coastal Commission in the coming months as we finalize the plan to ensure that they support the contents of it. And also, we will be submitting discrete amendments to the local coastal program in order to implement this plan. There are some changes in policy that are necessary in order for this plan to move forward. In particular, incorporating vehicle miles traveled, a new standard that's been imposed by the state on all local governments for assessing the impacts of projects, but also the delay index, which is a key part of this plan. And so we intend to amend that and any other necessary policy changes that are needed in the LCP to advance the plan. We also think that it's important, we've heard loud and clear that phased implementation is a concern, and that we need to come up with a way of really staying engaged with the community on this. So we believe that there needs to be a 5-year review of the plan, and that it needs to be tied to achievement of specific projects. So what we want to do is work with the community going forward in identifying what those key projects are that should be prioritized and implemented in that first 5-year period. And there are some ideas floating around about what those should be. And we also think that going forward, the engagement with the community on these specific projects and their design and implementation is important. So we think that the key projects like next segment of the multimodal trail, or intersection control and pedestrian crossings in Moss Beach, or other significant projects with a significant community interest like that, will require a public process for the project so that we can scope it, engage with the community during the design, as well as, of course, we have to engage with Caltrans and others who have control over some of these projects. But we think that all those are important elements of next steps in the project. And with that, I thank you for your attention. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. And of course, we are interested in your comments.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much, Katie and Shonda, and also you, Joe, for being here. Next, we're going to go into questions, first from the council and then from the community. I want to remind people we are having a 3-minute limit, and really encourage you to try to do it in less than 3 minutes so that everybody who can talk can. So first up is going to be Dan Haggerty.
You're on mute, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Len, and thank you, County San Mateo. I've got 3 questions or 3 concerns. First one is, there has been a whole heck of a lot of talk from the community members to the county regarding improvements to the highway starting from 2010. Now, all of these individuals invested their personal time on weekends, etc., to give these, to be part of this process. Now, why is it that none of these comments seem to be really included in the Connect the Coast Side processes of today?
Joe, any comment?
I'm not sure what you are referring to, Dan, but the the comments that we are focused on are the comments that we received subsequent to publishing the January 2020 draft. And so although there have been different reports and presentations and community meetings from the start of this project in 2014, and we've incorporated a number of the community generated projects from the Highway 1 safety and mobility studies that were done in 2010 and 2011, 2012. So a lot of those ideas and projects and proposals are in Connect the Coast Side, but the focus of this presentation tonight and the comments we're seeking are on our outreach and our response to comments that we received on the January draft.
Well, just my quick response is, if you're genuinely interested in the community's comments, then all of their comments around any changes to the highway should be included all the way back to 2010 with the mobility study. Second question is, I really don't agree with your official response on pedestrian underpasses. They are used in the county, in the state, across the nation, and across the globe where needed. They work very well, and frankly, traffic wouldn't work without them. I'm going to skip over that because I got a feeling you'll give me the same response as your official response.
Dan, your time is nearly up.
Okay, I'll go ahead and run the circle and come back to me.
Okay.
Well, I took some of his time, so I'm sorry about that.
It's in that period, though. We're going to run. So next up is Dave Olson.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. First, a comment. Thanks for the information on the plan changes. But the specific question was, could you give a little more detail about the change to voluntary lot retirement only being 1 year and what that means? I can think of many possible things that could mean.
It's actually in reference to the voluntary lot merger program. So the 2006 policy adopted by the Board of Supervisors, never implemented, called for an 18-month voluntary merger program that included some incentives to get people to bring their merger proposals to the county. And then once that 1 year, well, now we're proposing it to reduce it to 1 year. Once that voluntary program with incentives ran, then it would become a mandatory program with no incentives.
Perfect. That's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Toutant is going to be next. Before she starts, I just want to say that after each council member gets a shot, it's be open for public comment. So if you're a member of the public and you do want to ask questions, you should get your hand raised now. Claire, you're next.
Joe, thank you for the presentation. I do notice that there have been some changes that do seem to reflect community sentiment. So that's encouraging. I do have a question though. Apparently our 40 unit development cap is tied to the Connect the Coast Side in that once this is ratified, there's no longer a 40 unit cap. Is that true?
No. What we're saying is that we don't plan to eliminate the 40 unit cap. We are the constrained forecast, the 2040 forecast of development is predicated on the assumption that the 40 unit cap stays in place. And so basically we flatline the maximum number of dwelling units at 40 on into the future until there's no possibility of developing any more. And so the way that Connect the Coast side was tied to the cap in the LCP was to say, if you want to get rid of this 40 unit cap, then you must prepare this plan. We're doing both. We're keeping the cap, but we're preparing the plan.
Is the cap in the LCP, or where exactly is that?
Yes, the cap is in the LCP.
Okay, thank you.
We've never even gotten close to it since it was put in place in 2013. We've averaged about 17 units a year.
With Cypress Point, we will approach it.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Mhm.
Barb Mathewson, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you. This is on a couple of the slides that Chandra showed. First, it looks like you're considering and possibly recommending an overpass at 16th and Carlos, and at the same time, eliminating the bus stop at 16th and Carlos. So where are those folks that are traveling south supposed to catch the bus at? And it doesn't make sense to put an overpass, which would mostly be used for the bus.
The bus stop that we're eliminating is the one that we proposed to add on northbound Highway 1. We're not doing anything to the southbound Highway 1 16th Street bus stop. That will remain. And we're only saying that we will explore. We're not proposing. We are committing to look into whether a overpass is feasible. We're not suggesting that it is, but it was a suggestion that was made. And later, Lisa Ketchum clarified that she was referring to an overpass of Carlos that existed to allow the troops to move from the old barracks across Carlos and onto Highway 1. So we're not certain that it'll work, but it's something that we're going to look into as a possible pedestrian crossing. But we are not eliminating that existing southbound bus stop.
Okay, well, she did say that you were eliminating the bus stop, so that's why it was confusing. So thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Thank you, Barbara. Michelle Wild, do you have any questions?
No questions specifically right now. I think thank you for the presentation. It's good to see this moving forward and to have some of the feedback that the community gave being taken into consideration. I think I'm just looking forward to the next steps and to figuring out exactly which projects are going to move forward in which order. So I think that'll be our next discussion.
Great. Okay, well, I'll go. First, I want to thank Joe for making some of the clarifying comments in terms of the relationship of this study to the Coastal Commission and the different chartering statements. So that's a good step in that direction. We are going to have, basically, this is a quick note before I go to further community comment. I just want to make note that at this point, there's only one member of the community with comment. So that part may be fairly short. And then once we finish that, we'll go to some other items for feedback. But we now have Dolores Silva up.
Hello, yes. I'm very interested in this, understanding more about this 40 unit cap. I mean, I've been pretty familiar with it from the LCP about how there's a 40 unit cap and that there are exceptions where maybe for affordable housing, you can exceed 40 units in a year, but that over 3 years, it still has to average out to that 120 units. But it seems to me like Connect the Coast side is being rushed partly because of this issue of this cap and how the fact that the Cypress Point project kind of runs all over that cap. I mean, they want to build all 71 units at once. And I know that we've been running more at about a rate of about, I don't know, something like in the high teens per year versus the 40. And I think that that 40 unit cap was probably set, I mean, I don't know how it was set, but it was very generous. And even with all that pent up demand after 30 years of not having water connections, it was more than plentiful. So this cap is really confusing to me. I mean, we don't do a good job of tracking second units. And now we make exceptions. I think we're going to make a big, I mean, that's what I saw in the submission to the Coastal Commission from the Planning Department, that included in this zoning change and PUD change and everything is the request that all 71 units be allowed to be built at once. And so it makes me wonder if this cap, or if this affordable, I mean, if this rush to finish this connect the coast side is really driven by Cypress Point.
So Dolores, you have a question with regard to the cap and how it might relate to Cypress Point. So why don't we give Joe a chance to answer?
Well, I just want to say that the Board of Supervisors and my supervisors don't feel like we're rushing the plan. I mean, we're this plan has been underway for 6 years. So I think characterizing that as a rush is inaccurate. I think that but to answer your question about the cap, basically what would happen if all 71 units were built in a year, then over that 3-year period in which those were issued, you would have to factor in the number of single family units that might, say, be in the pipeline in that year. But basically there would only be 49 more units that could be built in that 3-year period. And so if, say, another maybe an 8-unit multifamily housing project came along, they would also be required to provide affordable housing under the county's inclusionary housing ordinance. That would reduce even further the number of single family homes that could be built. So as you pointed out, the cap allows for an amortization period of 3 years, averaging the number of building permits issued for residential units to an average of 40 a year. So the Cypress Point would suck the number of units that others could build out of the system.
Thank you, Joe. Next is Greg Diegas.
I may run out of time, so I'll send it to you in writing. But Joe, I did not want to miss the opportunity to commend you and Katie and your staff. You know, this project you've undertaken has not been a popular one out here. I feel it's been driven by county people, not the transportation planning staff, but other county priorities, rather than by the needs of the residents. But you guys have tried to listen. And even though I think you were given a sow's ear to make a silk purse out of, I've got to commend you for your responsiveness and professionalism. I just find the entire thing out of touch with reality. The traffic study should be delayed until the impact of COVID on the use of mass transportation and vehicle travel at all is considered. There's probably no significant traffic problem right now, even at Cypress. We got electric vehicles coming and people are starting to worry about vehicle miles travel. I mean, that's out of touch. We got a sea level rise down in Half Moon Bay that's going to threaten Highway 1. We got no evacuation plan. And the real problem is visitors. It took me 1 hour and 16 minutes to get from Montera to San Carlos on Sunday, starting at 4 p.m. It's not a holiday weekend. It was a Sunday. It's not during the summertime. We can't even get around here on a normal weekend because of the visitors. And there's nothing I see in here about it, about the visitor rationing them. I don't know what you're going to do. Finally, on signals versus roundabouts, I would say this is easily resolved by a peer-reviewed study, starting with finding somewhere else in the country where 3 roundabouts in close proximity with a similar 14-to-1 ratio of through traffic versus side traffic has ever worked. I found a place where it didn't, and they pulled out one of the roundabouts. But DKS or somebody's got an easy job there. Find places where 3 roundabouts in a row can work. And again, though, thank you all for doing your best, even though it's out of phase with reality in several respects.
Thank you, Greg. Next up is Marcia Yates. Marcia, did you, are you coming on or did you remove your request to speak? Okay, not hearing anything.
I removed it, but it looks like she's frozen.
So you think her machine may be frozen?
The video certainly appears to be frozen, yes.
Okay. Okay, while we're waiting for Marcia, Dan, we'll give you another shot.
Okay, and just like to quickly say that it's my belief that there should be, within the current Connect the Coast-Side process, there should be more transparency regarding past community opinion on ideas that are being proposed currently. I also wanted to touch on, what is it with these Caltrans, these recent Caltrans ideas, specifically the crosswalk at Miramar Drive and the signs. What is it? Why is it that when I ask Caltrans, they have no idea of any current planning process to our local Highway 1? With the crossing at Miramar Drive, full disclosure, I think it's asinine. There's already a functioning pedestrian underpass, which is really a culvert, but it's used as an underpass. It works fine. I've walked under it a number of times. They should remove the eucalyptus tree directly above it. Why put a crosswalk at one of the most dangerous curves on our highway? What is it about? Why isn't there a connection between Caltrans and this Connect the Coast-Side community discussion around the highway and crossings?
So you're asking for effective connectivity with Caltrans?
Yeah, if that's okay, I can respond to that.
Sure.
So that's a good point, Dan. And we were surprised by the signs and crosswalk proposal at Miramar ourselves. We were not consulted about that. But I will say that we are working furiously to try and improve our communication with Caltrans. And we are going to be attending regular meetings now that are held with Caltrans, CCAG, and the Department of Public Works and the San Mateo County Transportation Authority to both advance projects that are in Connect the Coast-Side and just try to improve overall coordination and communication. And one of the things that we are planning is a meeting with Caltrans and kind of responding to Greg's point with the Director of Public Works from Truckee and some members of the Midcoast Community Council to look at Moss Beach recommendations in Connect the Coast-Side and make sure they're viable and make sure they're the right ones. And so including looking at this idea of 2 or more roundabouts in the Moss Beach area and how we fit the parallel trail through there and so on. So we think we're trying to turn a new page with Caltrans, but the proof will be in the pudding.
Okay.
Since you brought up Truckee, I want to make
Dan,
a comment.
Dan, your time is up on this one. They're going to go to Barb Mathewson.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask another question about on the slides when Shonda was going over the different goals and plans for the Connect the Coast side. She skipped over the evacuation plan. Can you enlighten us a little bit as to what your part in the evacuation plan is going to be?
Well, thanks. Our part is going to be to consult with CAL FIRE and Office of Emergency Services to clarify what the emergency evacuation plans are for the coast side, and make sure that there's nothing we're doing to compromise those evacuation plans, and that we make sure that they're referenced in the plan. Now, I want to add that another project that Katie and I and Office of Sustainability are launching soon, along with OES, Office of Emergency Services, is an update to the county's local hazard mitigation plan. It's going to be completed by this time next year, and it will address a number of the issues that have emerged, both dealing with pandemic, with fire, and other hazards that are on us in part because of climate change. So we will be addressing the evacuation routes in that plan. So Connect the Coast side wasn't really set up to address, evacuation routes, and yet it is an issue of importance. So it's important that any plan that the county does that addresses transportation on the coast side integrates emergency evacuation as part of it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Dolores Silva.
Len, I think that Marcia might be back also. You might try her again.
Let's give it a try. Marcia Yates, if you're there,
Okay.
can you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Go for it, Marcia.
Sorry, I was a little technically challenged there. Marcia Yates, Moss Beach, and I just have to say that Barbara hit my point. I was going to ask about evacuation plans, so that was something I was concerned about. And also, I just have to say that it is a hard job, and I have to agree with Greg. I thank you guys a lot for it, but there's still a lot of things that we need to talk about for Moss Beach in particular. So I'm glad that they're coming up and looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dolores.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Joe about this evacuation plan. How will that affect your view about build out? I mean, I think that the LCP makes it pretty clear that full build out is unsustainable. And now we have the question of how we handle evacuations as we allow more development. And will that be considered in Connect the Coast side, in your evaluation of, will you evaluate build out and evacuation potential?
No, we're not planning to do that. However, we are planning to address the evacuation plans that are in place and that will be developed going forward to provide, for evacuation from the coast side in the event of a landslide, a fire, a earthquake, tsunami, and but generally speaking, emergency plans are the places where evacuation planning is done. However, we recognize that siloing planning isn't a successful strategy. So we think that having integration between what's in Connect the Coast side and what's in our emergency operations plans, our local hazard mitigation plan, is important. And so including evaluating whether any of the proposals in Connect the Coast side would compromise safe evacuation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dan, one last shot, 3 minutes or less. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Question, you were talking about Truckee earlier, and it spawned the idea that my question to you is, are you aware that in the Truckee area on Highway 89, 2-lane highway, very similar to ours, they have built a number of underpasses for wildlife at the cost of about $1 million or less each. And these are structures that will hold any truck driving over it. I think it's 12 feet wide, 10 feet tall. If a bear can walk through it, a human can. You know, what is the cost of a few lights? Are you aware that they're building these up there? And I do understand that we are not Truckee. We have other you know, restraints in our area, but are you aware that you know, that they have been building them at that cost, and also on Highway 50 under 4 lanes for under $2 million, over 200 feet of underpass? Are you aware of all this?
Great, thanks, Dan.
No, but thank you for bringing it to our attention. We'll certainly ask the Public Works Director about it when we meet with him.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks, Joe, and your whole team for coming to us this week. I'm going to go to the next item on the agenda. This will be relatively quick, but it extends into our next meeting. So basically, in the document that Joe has released, I'm going to now share my screen and go to desktop 1. So in the documents shared, let's see here, that we have in Appendix 7, this is the one that Shonda really spent her time summarizing. There's an enormous amount of specifics there, and I know many people have expressed concern about the lack of discussion and specifics. And what you see throughout it, and she had slides on each of these, are in every given area is talking about proposed changes to connect the coast side, and they're often quite specific. So they offer a chance to see whether your comments or thoughts have been represented, and there's a large number there. So I encourage every individual who's interested in it to do that, to take a look, see what's there. And from a comment opportunity standpoint, when we had our meetings this summer, including the study session, a summary of that was prepared for some 200 comments that were captured in our minutes. And those are in a separate report table, sort of identified by the person who spoke and sorted by category. I put the comments on the virtual meeting where there were at least 20 in the first page, but there's about 9 pages of these. And those are really good to look at in terms of what we took away from the summer. You may find yourself represented or want to slightly edit it. If you want changes, you can get back to me and I'll tell you how to do it. But more importantly, coming up, a new section, a new document is creating, and this is one to receive comments from the community. Many of you have, besides what you said at these meetings, have sent emails with very explicit statements that are well phrased, sometimes even short papers, and I'd like to be able to capture those. So where I've noted some, I'll send emails to people. But if reading the documents that have been presented to us, especially Appendix 7 of the report, where there are a lot of specifics, if you see something you would like to comment to, by all means do it well, and then send it to me by email. Really send it to the whole Midcoast Council, but I will capture it in the document. Now, just for reference, a name you all know, Lisa Ketchum, wrote one such email And that's the one document in there, just to take some particulars she did after reading a section in Appendix 7. This probably isn't Lisa's last comment, and there really isn't a cap on what we put in here. So again, something will go out to our distribution on how to connect to it. And if you want to see the current status of the document, that's there in the blog post. And finally, Joe spoke to requirements and priorities. And while the document itself has long priority lists, I think moving toward a view of working with 5-year windows is an excellent idea and to our advantage. So what I prepared and is also posted in our blog post are some thoughts on what would be the priorities for our next 5 years for the Midcoast. I put it up there, identified the area, what community might be targeted as a starting point. So it's there for everyone to inspect, and its only limitation is it's not going to have more than 7 or 8, but take a look at it, see if you think it captures what you think is most important. And if you disagree, send in a note, but this will come up to the council on the 14th to try to hone it down to 7 or 8 that we select. And I think it's the only tool we have to keep a track of something. What we found is when for example, the bridge was closed on the coastal trail, Caltrans and the county could react very quick. I mean, they might have done it with more advanced planning, but they can respond quickly there. Or for some reason, they decided an intersection would be nice someplace, they seem to respond very quickly. When we, and I met the 3 MCC members, went to the meeting with Caltrans, I also found, though, that they were really tuned on things that could be done with real planning, but really taking with 5 years. So I think keeping in mind this 5-year window is a good place for us to put our real emphasis on the guidance we'd like to give for what's important. But it's a point we will discuss on the October 14th meeting, and I'll get out notes on how to contribute to it and bring it forward there. If there are any quick questions about that, by all means ask them, but we're not going to really have that discussion part here. That'll be for the next meeting. Dave Olson?
Okay, I thought you had intended for some discussion on that.
Well, we've really run late, and we have both a couple of items to go through. I really I would like everybody who wants to comment, just go through Appendix 7, where there are a lot of specifics in that. And anybody with interest should be able to find specifics maybe that meet their needs or at least is relevant to priorities. So
I was referring specifically to the priorities item.
Yeah, no, I want to do that on the 14th. I'll circulate that. Thank you. Anything else here? Okay, so we'll send a note out to our agenda distribution with more particulars there. And with that, we're going to the last item on our regular agenda, and that is D, and this is on the newsletter. So we're going to have a report from Michelle Weil.
Hi there. Would you or Dave mind presenting the newsletter up on the screen?
Sure, just a minute. I've got it in.
I'll just give a bit of an overview of what we're doing. So as many of you know, at the last several meetings, can you hear me?
I can't, just one second. So I'm going to show that actually.
No, yeah.
The newsletter itself right here, there is a link to this draft on our webpage. So that's what I'm going to call up here.
Got it.
Okay, it's now being shared.
Great. So, so the purpose of this agenda item is to go through what's hopefully very close to a final draft of the newsletter, which everyone on the council has had an opportunity to read through now in detail. Any member of the audience can go and on the website, as Len said, and look through it yourselves. I did send it out and received only comments back from Dave on the newsletter. So I believe he has a few items that he wants to go through. I think the best way to do it is to go around to each person on the council and have them, have each person say whether they have any feedback or comments, and then we can discuss as a council.
Good idea. Well, since we know Dave has some, we're going to go with Dave first.
Great.
Then we'll go to Claire. We'll go to Michelle. And we'll go to Dan and then myself. So go ahead, Dave.
Excuse me, I'm part of the council
Barb?
too.
Oh, I put you down at 3. I just didn't read the name right. You're right after Claire. Barb?
Okay, you ready for me to go?
Yes.
Okay, I'd suggest this. There's some purely mechanical ones in here too. Removing the link on the CZU fire update since we're now at 100% containment, 99% when I wrote that. And it was also in the newsletter twice with different wording. The other fire links are fine. On the Medio Bridge pedestrian detour, we can say it's all done except for the lane restriping. By the time it goes out, it'll be completely done. And then I had a comment that I wasn't particularly happy about Len's list of project priorities since the council has not yet discussed them and neither has the public. And that was it.
Okay.
Thank you very much for everybody who worked on it.
So Dave, with attention to the notes you mentioned, are you good for the group to go ahead and publish it?
Yeah, I would just like something reworded on that priorities, make it clear that these are very early draft.
Right. This was written, I mean, really, it's it'll get it. Ideally, it'll get out while before we get to the 14th and alert people on that. But I take your point. Okay, next, Claire.
I commend the effort that went into this. Thank you. Other than the things that Dave just mentioned, there was also an email that I just barely saw as we started the meeting from Lisa Ketchum with some concerns, so you might want to look at that.
Okay.
I feel very strongly about what Dave said about the priorities being listed here, because we have not decided on those. I'd like to see that removed.
Okay, good. Yeah, this was written well in terms of when will the meetings come. Gotcha. Okay. But with those taken into account, you're okay to go?
It's good.
Okay, thank you. Barb.
Thank you. I do have Lisa's email, and there's a couple things she'd like to do is see changed. Is the correct date for the Midcoast LCP is 2012. It was certified by the California Coastal Commission August of 2012 and effective 3 days later. And then the other suggestion that she has, which I agree with very much, is on the pump track article. At some point, there's going to be people like myself that had never heard of a pump track until they showed up at the meeting. So somewhere in that article, it'd be nice if bicycle got put in there somewhere. And I agree with that. And the other thing is, I'm just not real hot on the name of the newsletter. I don't know if it could be Midcoast Community Newsletter or Midcoast Community. I don't know. Midcoast Newsletter just sounds kind of weird. But other than that, I'm good with it. Oh, and I'm also right up there with everybody else about the priorities. We should be deciding the priorities, not one person. Thank you.
No, that's why they're published now, so we can have that discussion. Well, Barb, given what you just said, what if it were to say Midcoast Communities Newsletter, since we view ourselves as having really 5 separate communities? So
I don't care for the communities, because I think what we're trying to do is stay together and not be further separated as groups.
Yeah, I would agree
it's
with
for
that.
it's for all of us. So I just think Midcoast Community would make it a little bit ours, but also the communities as well.
I agree, and no plural.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Dan, you're next. Dan, you're mute.
Sorry about that, everyone.
No problem.
I just have some continued general concerns with how do we keep transparency. And I just want to remind everybody here that the question on the survey was receive a newsletter, and the implication is it was already decided that there would be a newsletter. Would you like to receive it or not? Instead of having a question that might be more important, should the MCC enter a potentially conflicting relationship with the county in order to come up with a newsletter and potentially diverting energy from the MCC on more important issues. We've spent a lot of time on this. I've given a lot of my personal comments, which were not really reflected on the final draft. That's about it. I think that, we're entering, everybody needs to know that the county has certain interests, the community has certain interests, and they don't always agree with each other. So it's a difficult
Okay, to what happened there?
try to work together and try to have a comment. It's going to tax the MCC, and I'm not really in favor of this.
Okay, I
newsletter.
appreciate that, Dan. So let me, basically, my take when we started it was certainly looked at as an effort with some degree of collaboration. In working on it, Michelle, you and I, along with Carrie, and then later on Lena, were the working members. And I felt that the county staff that supported it did their job very well. I mean, they had a lot of detail work to do. They put things in. They took almost all edits we gave to them. And I found also, between the last meeting and this one, I put a fair bit of time on to write the articles to frame them as I thought was appropriate for the coast. I find that's a really difficult job. But anyway, and I think Michelle and I felt on the council, on the committee, felt that only by putting together a draft like this one could you really have a sense of how well we're doing. So I'm happy to put it forward as I think a good effort. When we look at doing more of them, the concern is it takes time on members' efforts. And Dan, you had opportunities to review the last draft. You were copied and did not make additional comments. So, you just have to have that flexibility of time to do it.
Well, I made a number of comments that were ignored.
Well, the last draft was there for everybody to comment on. Anyway, what I've heard is that the three members who were not on the committee let me just summarize what I heard, are okay to go ahead with publishing this with the edits we discussed. I think on the committee, Michelle and I are supportive and you are not. So that's my summary of what I heard for the discussion. And anybody wants to comment, that would to me look like a go ahead, but I'm open to further comments.
Well, I will move that we publish the newsletter with the changes that were just discussed over the last few minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Claire.
So I have my hands up, Lynn.
Go ahead.
So how are we going to change are you going to eliminate the priority section, or how are you going to do that?
It's a good question. One of the problems is sort of effectively how to edit it. And so basically the committee will edit in the comments that were brought up here to the best of our ability. And then we will probably run it by for a quick edit pass for the council.
Well, I think several members had, Len, I think several members had issues with that section, and I didn't provide my comments, but I also had issues with that section, especially, I mean, the original proposal was that we were going to discuss those priorities tonight, and that section was a draft, assuming that, you know, those were discussed at tonight's meeting. Now we just skipped past that section of the meeting and didn't discuss it. So I would actually suggest that we remove that section completely.
I have no problem with that, Michelle. The problem in getting the letter out all along has been it's sort of a moving target relative to things. So I mean, I don't have any disagreement with that at all.
Okay, great.
So there. Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll be voting no tonight. I just think that really before we even get started, that as a council, we should have, if we do decide to move forward, we should at least at minimum have a kind of a policy letter written regarding a newsletter as to what content is appropriate, what content is not appropriate. And, you know, that's about it. I think we're,
okay.
You know, we're kind of moving too fast.
Okay, yep. I hear that.
Can I just speak to that?
Sure.
You know, we at a previous meeting decided to move forward with the newsletter, and then you expressed interest in being on the committee. You know, the three of us have worked on this.
My comments still stand.
Okay. There's just a disagreement on that point, Michelle. Claire,
sorry,
you have go ahead, Michelle.
Before, so the discussion
hold on.
tonight is, can I just finish?
Yeah,
the discussion tonight was meant to be to either approve the newsletter as is, approve it with edits, or reject the newsletter. It sounds like the council is leaning toward approving it. Prior to the next edition of the newsletter, this is proposed to be a quarterly newsletter, so the next edition would come, you know, be published about 3 months after this one. We'd want to start the work at least a month to 6 weeks prior to that. Before that, we will have a discussion in terms of the process moving forward. So let's save any comments on that until we have that discussion at a future council meeting.
Okay, Claire, you have a comment?
Yes, I really don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I don't like the font. I find it hard to read. It's all close together. If there was a way to just change the font and make it a little easier to read, I would be in favor of that.
Okay, got it.
That should be an easy change. We'll test out a few different options. You have to know when you send a newsletter, there's only maybe like 10 fonts that show up in all the different, you know, Gmail and Apple Mail and all the different types of programs that people use Outlook to open their newsletters. So I think you're limited to like Arial, Times New Roman, or a few others. So we'll test a few and see what could potentially look better than this.
Okay, thank you. Barb, another comment?
Yeah, just real quick. I do appreciate the work that you guys have put into this. I really do. And I would just like to see, and I think that what Michelle's saying is true, wait till next year to change it a little bit. I would just like to see some more local things written that are just unique to us and not just generic articles. But I say we just go ahead and let this one go with edits.
Okay. Claire, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, so we are voting on whether to approve authorizing the newsletter with the edits that have been suggested.
Correct.
Len?
Yes.
Len?
Yes.
Dan? Dan?
You're mute, Dan.
No.
Barbara?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
I vote yes, so it passes 5-1.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So does anybody have council activity that they, or correspondence that they would like to report on? I mentioned earlier that Caltrans had been contacted by Half Moon Bay for a discussion on the signs. And so and they're planning to give another presentation of that. And that will be noticed when it occurs. That's that's update I have. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, very briefly, I attended the most recent MWSD meeting for something I was personally interested in, and I was asked to give a brief summary of what the MCC has been up to, and the obvious we've all been talking about. So,
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else for this agenda item?
I'm sorry, Len. One other thing.
Okay.
I did also attend the Harbor District meeting, and I spoke as a private citizen on that issue of meeting times, and
Okay,
also private
we'll
citizen
put that-
spoke to the Half Moon Bay Review about it.
Mhm.
And there was an article in the review today about it.
Okay.
Dave, could you repeat, please? Dave, please repeat, because you were breaking up and I didn't understand what you said.
I think it was breaking up on your end, Dan, not anywhere else. It'll be on the video.
Say, Dave, just a point on that. We are going to pick that point up under future agendas. So could we just slide it into that?
No, this was just the report.
Yeah. Okay, go
Just
ahead.
please allow Dave to repeat it, please.
Okay, well, you are breaking up, Dan, so I think it's all at your end, but I'll try one more time. I attended the Harbor District meeting. I spoke as a private citizen against the change in meeting time. And I also spoke to the Half Moon Bay Review reporter about it for the article that showed in the review today, again, as a private citizen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving ahead to future agendas. On October 14th, we will have the review of Connect the Coastside comments coming forward from the community. Active Transportation will be here to present to us. And I have invited Kelix Nelson to speak on wildfire defense, etc. I would like to find people who would like to work on that agenda item. Are there any people interested in working on it? I guess.
Yes, I would be interested.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay, anybody else interested? So Barb and Ann, nobody else on the council. Greg, you have your hand up. Is that?
Dave's got his hand up.
Yeah, no.
To the degree I'm allowed to work on it, I'd be glad to work on it.
Okay, well, we can invite community there. I'm sorry, Dave, did you have your hand up?
No, I just forgot to lower it.
Okay, so we have Barb and Dan, and then I'll add myself to it as I'm the one who contacted Kelix. So we'll do that and we'll reach out to Greg. You could be welcome.
You know what? I'm going to remove myself from the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to join this effort? Twist arms, etc. Okay. Let's see. I don't think anything else here needs further discussion there.
Hold on. Well, wait.
What?
We're not. Are you closing the item?
Well, we just have people that would work on it. So far, that's you and me and Greg from the community.
Okay, that's fine there. Yeah, but I want to continue to talk about potential other agenda items.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so yes, I
Yeah,
think
these are items you want to sponsor,
Dave,
right?
thank you. Say again.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you for. Okay, so thank you, Dave, for what you did as far as your comments. I think that we should have an agenda item regarding the Harbor District returning to evening meetings for maximum public participation.
Okay. I think that is certainly within the province of the council to bring that up. Does anybody else have thoughts about that?
I have very strong concerns about doing that until after the election, because two of the people who voted for that are up for a re-election, and I do not want to do anything
So,
tangled with the election.
No, I disagree strongly.
Well, hold on. So let me just clarify. So Dave, what you're saying is you would be supportive if it, let's say, occurred at the first meeting in November, which is after the election, but not before that. Is that right?
That's my position, yes.
Understand. And Dan, you are interested in having it come up sooner. Is that right?
Yeah, we need to take a position on it. The concept and
You're breaking up badly, Dan, so you'll have to restart.
This is the Midcoast Community Council. Did you hear me?
No, you need to start from the beginning of your pitch.
Okay. So that I'm getting messages that my internet is unstable for whatever reason. Probably a raccoon on the wire in the pole.
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It may help if you turn off your video for this part.
I'll do that. Take your advice. Let's see. Okay. So, yeah, I think that, the harbor, Pillar Point Harbor is extremely important to the coastsiders, Midcoast. The concept of, I don't care if it's election time or not, it doesn't matter. It's business that they're doing, and we need to really discuss and really encourage the Harbor District to provide opportunity for the community members to participate. And by having it in the middle of the day is absurd. It makes it extremely difficult for your average working class member of the community to participate.
Okay. So Dan, what I hear is that nobody, well, let me ask Barbara, could you speak?
I'm kind of on the fence on this. I agree with what Dave's saying, and yet I also agree with what Dan's saying. So I don't have an opinion at this point.
Let me break it up into two parts. And I think everybody would seem to be in favor of the council discussing this matter. And the difference is whether we agendize it for the first meeting in November or for one of our October meetings. That seems to be the only point of difference. Dave's clearly on one side, Dan is on the other. Barb, you're on the fence. So Michelle and Claire, could you give your opinions?
I agree 100% with Dave. I don't.
Okay, and Michelle.
I was trying to say something there, but I guess
you broke up. You broke up badly. Go ahead and say it again.
It came through your thing there. No, I just don't see any point in antagonizing people who are up for election before the election takes place. It sounds like we've got a full agenda for next meeting anyway, and a week or two is not going to matter in terms of setting policy for the county.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I completely agree with the sentiment that it's not appropriate to have meetings during the middle of the day. I just question whether it's up to us or whether, it's appropriate for us to actually, comment on that and send a letter. I'd be definitely open to discussing it. I don't have strong feelings whether or not that happens prior to or after the election, but I do see Dave and Claire's point. And if we do have a full agenda, I don't think there's a lot of harm in waiting until the first meeting in November.
Okay, so why don't let's just go to a vote then. Would somebody
Hey,
make a motion?
Glenn, can I,
Yes,
before we
please.
vote?
Yes, Dan.
So, okay. So we go.
Dan, you're breaking up badly.
How many people? How many people on the council honestly believe that the majority of the people are even aware of this? Really, it's our duty to inform the community that you know, steps were taken to really essentially squelch the community's input. It's our duty to we need to talk about this immediately, not delay. I hear somebody tapping on their keyboard. Should I continue to talk?
Yeah, I thought you were cut off. You just stopped.
I said that the majority of the community is not even aware of this. It's our duty to inform the community and to talk about it and open up both sides of discussion. We should not delay. Big mistake.
Okay, I've heard your
Try to
point.
put this off.
Dan, okay, I think we've heard your point. I think it's appropriate to vote now. So if
What are we voting on?
Len, yeah, two things if I may.
Yes,
Yes, one is we don't have any motion on the floor.
that's right.
The other thing is setting the contents of the agenda is the function of the chair. I don't think we need to vote on it. I think you need to make a decision.
I think well, I'm happy to be happy to have a vote on it from the council, even just as a straw vote, but I'm fine to go ahead with the decision.
So if we're going to vote, we need a motion.
We can do a straw vote.
Okay. So we will do a straw vote. This is people who are in favor of waiting to hold it in November, say yes.
Yes.
And if you want to do it sooner, say no. So just Claire, you said yes.
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
And Dan? Dan? I think you would be no, Dan. And I'm a yes. So we'll take that under advisement.
I don't know if my internet's gone out, but my vote is no.
Oh, got it. So it was 5-1 to wait till November. Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Done deal. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.